In this video, I will be reconstructing the blue dress from The Notebook. However, I will be making my reconstruction historically accurate to the 1940s. In one of my previous videos, I analyzed the costumes in The Notebook, which did not do justice to the period. The blue dress isn't terrible, but it is not the correct silhouette. The shoulders on Allie's blue dress are rounded when they should be padded or more structured. The skirt is also a bit too tight. Skirts in the 1940s were loose and slightly full. The pencil dress or sheath dress did not come into fashion until Dior released his H-line dress in the 1950s. And finally, the hem just barely covers the knee when it should come an inch or two below the knee. Here is the pattern that I will be using for this project. This is the dress that I will be using to model mine. It is very similar to the Notebook dress, however, it has all of the correct attributes of a 1940s dress, which makes sense because this is a 1940s pattern. Since the sleeves are structured and extend outward, it doesn't seem that shoulder pads will be necessary to achieve that classic 1940s silhouette. The skirt is not as tight as the blue dress in the Notebook, and the hem lands a few inches below the knee. So this is the fabric I will be using for this project. It is a cotton lycra stretch. I usually don't use like synthetic fabrics. I try not to because I like to compost my scraps. I think the color is very, very similar. It may be just a tiny bit darker than the one in the film. Obviously, when making reconstructions, it's hard to get everything to be like 100% spot on. So in case you didn't see my Notebook analysis video, this iconic costume isn't spot on to the 1940s. But before I go any further, I wanted to give a little disclaimer. I do not want to knock the costume designer. Karen Wagner worked incredibly hard crafting these costumes. Usually costume designers are at the whim of the director or producers, so the lack of historical accuracy is not on her. Although I can be a bit sarcastic and cynical, it is never my intention to discredit or bash a costume designer when making my videos. It is solely to educate about dress history. So the blue dress in the film has rounded shoulders, a pencil skirt, and doesn't button down to the knees. The first two characteristics are much more 1950s. The 1940s silhouette is characterized by square, usually padded shoulders, a nipped waist, a slightly full, somewhat straight skirt, and a hem that fell right below the knee. It is also important to mention that this film took place in 1940s rural South Carolina. The film also indicates that Allie's father has more money than God. So I think it is safe to say that she would be a high-status conservative woman, and her clothing would probably adhere to those values. She wouldn't be wearing her hem above the knee and a tight skirt. Okay, so I just drew all the darts, so right now I'm going to pin them and then sew them. But first, let's choose a thread color. This is good. That's actually like spot on. I'd rather it be a little lighter than darker. This is good. So when using vintage thread, it's really important to test it and make sure that it's strong enough to sew with, because a lot of vintage thread has degraded over time and becomes very brittle. That happened with my last project. I was using one of my yellowish orange threads. It snapped before I even tested it. Just note to any vintage thread sewers out there, just be careful, because you could sew with it and then your whole entire seam just falls apart because it's so brittle. So yeah, just a little note. Okay, so right now I am on to pinning, sewing, and pressing all the darts. Okay, so right now I am cutting some bias binding. This is for the neck. I obviously don't need this much, but I just wanted to cut more than I needed. Here is the bias tape. I just finished ironing it. So now I'm going to get on to sewing the bodice front to the bodice back. So I'm just trying on the bodice to see where it will land. I did shorten it because I have a rather short torso, and if I don't, it will be way too long on me. So I'm kind of just examining the fit. And it looks like it's actually going to be a tiny bit too short, so I'm going to make sure that when I'm sewing the bodice to the skirt, I will definitely keep a very small margin for the seam allowance. Okay, so I just finished the neck binding. I just did it off camera because it's kind of late and I just wanted to get it done. Good morning, it is day 2. So I just wanted to show you guys something real quick because I thought it was cool. I just got it in the mail. I got this sewing manual from 1944. How cool is this? I have like 1 or 2 of these already, but these really enable me to make my constructions as historically accurate as possible, and they're just so cool. Like sewing techniques today that you would find in like a sewing book that you just bought online would generally be the types of techniques that are like time saving, and you would have to buy like more of an advanced book to get like these techniques, which were just the default in the mid-century because women were in the home much more, practicing sewing from a very young age. They already knew kind of what to do. So a lot of these techniques are a little more advanced and just intricate. Yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that. I'm probably gonna even do a whole nother video where I just title it like sewing tips from 1944 because I feel like that would be interesting because I can't be the only one who wants to know about mid-century techniques. But anyway, yeah, let's get on to our project. So right now I am making the buttonhole placements, the fold line, hemming the raw opening edge of the dress, and sewing the skirt panels together. Now to give a little more background on 1940s dress, the Second World War changed every aspect of civilian life and dress was no exception. The global rationing of textiles imposed in the early 1940s led many countries to develop programs that encouraged creativity and innovation surrounding fashion. Paris ceased being the capital of fashion for a few years, and Britain and America took over and left a lasting impact on ready-to-wear clothing, specifically on sportswear and casual wear. Many different substitute fabrics were used in place of silk, wool, and leather, like cork, wood, and canvas. During the war, only 5 colors of leather were available, and adults were only allowed 1 new pair of leather shoes a year at the height of rationing. Men's older suits and coats would be transformed by women into a new suit for themselves. One innovation of the time, which was known as the peasant skirt, was a patchwork skirt made out of squares of scraps of fabric and ribbon. Okay, so I just finished sewing all the skirt panels together. So cute. It's on backwards, but like I really like it so far. I really like the length. I really like this fabric too. It's just like just stiff enough, but like not too stiff. Nylon, which was developed in 1939, became an essential material for hosiery since Japanese imports of silk were no longer available. Programs like Make, Do, and Mend in Britain and Make and Mend in the US encouraged freshening clothing instead of purchasing new items. This is definitely a value we could use more of today. So I just kind of put the sleeve on. It looks so cool. Like, it looks different than in the photo of it. Wow, I like the way that looks. It's so interesting looking. I was just kind of placing it. This is not the final like placement. I know it's gonna go in a little bit further, but I like that a lot. Okay, so I just put the sleeves on the bodice. I like the way it looks so far. On to making the belt. So here I have measured my waist, which is 26 inches, and added a few inches to each side. Because I don't have belting, I am using band roll, which is a stiff interfacing used for waistbands. I am using a belt kit I got from Mood. I would have preferred a buckle just a smidge smaller, but this is the only one that they had. The 1940 sewing manual actually had a section about covering belt buckles, which I will look into for next time. Using these kits isn't ideal because the sticky fabric doesn't fold perfectly over the belt buckle. Next, I am moving on to making my fabric buttons. These are fun to make because you can make them by hand pretty quickly and they look professional. I purchased these buttons and simple button making tools off Etsy for less than $20. Now I'm getting ready to make my buttonholes. I'm referring to my 1940s sewing manual in order to just see how they would have been made in the mid-century and follow along to their specific directions. I'm definitely not the best at making perfectly aesthetically pleasing buttonholes. Thankfully, these are just functional enough to get the job done, but I will definitely be practicing making more buttonholes in the future. Next, I am sewing my fabric covered buttons onto the dress. Okay, I got these buttons done, and now I'm moving on to the rest of them. I finally finished the buttons. It took me like 4 hours to do everything, but they are done. Yay! I am finally on the last step of this dress. I am doing a double fold hem, which works well with this simple A-line dress, and then sewing it in place. Now that I am just about finished, let's move on to the reveal. I loved making this historical version of the blue dress while using mid-century sewing techniques. I have a particular love for 1940s dress, and the ingenuity women used in their everyday fashion inspires me within my own wardrobe. I believe the use everything very carefully and meaningfully attitude would benefit today's overly consumerist, spendthrift society. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe. Please join me for my upcoming cozy autumnal sewing content for September, October, and November. Have a great week otherwise. Bye.